Good evening, Xavier, Musketeer basketball fans. This is Jim Reaker, formerly of Razorcast, and we now have a new friend with us, and that's Bill Gabriel. Jeff Zink has left it, and we're going to call it this year, we are the RaGing X Report. And we tried to do a preview show last week, but we had some technical difficulties, so things didn't go. We didn't get it up on the website, but we're hoping things will go well today, and we'll get this started with our weekly report on the Muskies, and we'll probably be recording most times on Monday evening, so you can look for us to be posted sometime probably Tuesday or Wednesday on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Well, my new friend now is Bill Gabriel. Not a new friend, he's an old friend. He's been traveling with me and going to Musketeer games, I think we said last week, for about 22 years, but we've both been watching the Musketeers a lot longer than that. But I want to welcome into the show Bill Gabriel. How you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks for having me aboard. This will be a great endeavor to have with you. We get to talk about one of our favorite topics, the Xavier Musketeers.
Yes, we will. And we have seen the Musketeers actually 3 times now with 1 exhibition game and 2 non-conference games under their belts. So we got a little bit more to talk about. We've seen a little bit, so we can kind of see what's going on here as the season starts to progress, and it's going to get underway real quick here as the Musketeers again will be playing again tomorrow night against the Wisconsin Badgers. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. First 2 games in the exhibition that we've seen, what are your initial reactions to the Musketeers this year?
My initial reactions are they are a lot better offensively than I thought they would be coming out of the gate. Feared that they would struggle a little bit with their offensive identity, and it almost seems like everyone expected them to have a defensive identity, and it's flipped. They're struggling a little bit on defense and not so much on offense. I think that they've had a different guy step up every night, which is what great teams have offensively. They're never consistently hanging their hat on one guy, and it seems like the Musketeers this year have had somebody step up. And I think that the guard combination of Quentin Gooden and Paul Scruggs are going to be a phenomenal backcourt from what I've seen so far. And, you mix in what Tyreek Jones is bringing to the table this year and everybody else. And, offensively they've been knocking down shots and doing some good things. Defensively, they got some work to do.
Yeah, and those first 2 games, which a lot of Musketeer fans thought would be, I guess what you would term cupcakes, easy games, but both of them kind of were still games late in the second half. So let's talk about the new players, and we previewed them, but that show obviously didn't record or didn't get downloaded for a technical reason. Are the new players, and we got the 2 freshmen, Keontae Kennedy and James, I'm missing his first name, and then we have the 3 grad transfers, Zach Hankins, Kyle Caslin, and who am I missing?
Ryan Welledge,
which, and I wasn't so up on him, but he had a good first game in the first game. But are they as advertised as we've read about them through the summer as the new players coming in? Has anybody surprised you? And how do you see them fitting into the overall rotation for the Musketeers?
I think Kyle Caslin is exactly as advertised. Everything that I read about him coming into this season was that he was a tough kid, that he was a player. He's going to make plays for you. He has the ability to score the ball, and that's what he's done so far. He hasn't had a anytime I've noticed him, he hasn't had a bad day, and he hasn't had a phenomenal day yet. He's been consistent. He's made some, stellar plays and moments, and been a solid rebounder and defender. So I think he's been exactly as the media reported coming over from Columbia. I think that Ryan Welledge has been kind of as he was advertised. I think his shot looks really good. He's not made as many as I think he would like to, but he still was lighting it up there the second half against IUPUI, and he made a couple shots against Evansville, but he kind of disappeared the second half. So, and I'm wondering if that was kind of the flip side of the coin on him, was a little bit of concern over his defensive abilities, and maybe he was a part of the Evansville getting so many looks from behind the 3-point arc. And I didn't notice anything glaring, but maybe that was part of it, or they felt they were better defensively with somebody else out there. Zach Hankins, he so far has looked like he's going to be a solid sub for Tyreek. It looks like he is a guy who, once he kind of gets into that role of being that off-the-bench player, can bring a lot of energy. Looks like he really feeds off the crowd and tries to feed into the crowd. And I think the two of them are going to give Xavier a dominant low-post presence. Then the freshman, Dontarius James, he looks like his role is basically going to be to give Najee a break, from what I've noticed just in the first couple games. He's not played extended minutes. I think he was like 6 minutes and 7 minutes in each of the two games. And maybe he's kind of the sub for the Najee in the 3, or maybe play a little 4. But they haven't given him a whole lot of extended minutes. And then the other freshman, Keontae Kennedy, he has played some extended minutes. He's been in about 17, 18 minutes the first 2 games. And he looks like he's an athletic kid who's a good defender. So far, his shot looks good, even though he's just 2 for 9. But, a freshman in his first run through with his new college team, he's probably got some jitters going on there. And once I think he gets comfortable and settles in, those will start going down for him.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting tomorrow night to see how deep the rotation goes as, again, the Wisconsin Badgers come calling, and the first, really tough opponent, and see how far Coach Steele goes on his bench tomorrow night against the Badgers. It'll be interesting to see. Coach Steele, he's new too. Lots of new things, lots of new players, but a new coach. What are your initial impressions, if any, of Coach Steele, how he's handled his press conferences, the things he said, and the way he's rotated players? Do you have any impressions of him compared to Coach Mack?
I don't see anything that's like, wow, Xavier, missed the boat on that one. Everything he has done has been just the opposite. It's been like, wow, hey, let's hire this guy. He's the top assistant, and he's got a couple guys who stayed in kind of the basketball operations side of things, and he had to go out and get 3 assistant coaches, and he hit, basically home runs with everybody he got. He got a guy who can coach and recruit the bigs and can recruit from the Georgia, the state of Georgia in the South. He got a assistant coach who can work the guards and can recruit the Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And then he got a former Xavier alum and, guy who can basically help out as needed and has had some success recruiting as well. And I think that, along with the fact that he got 3 grad transfers to agree to come, and he was a new coach to fill roles where the Xavier lacked depth. I think he's done a great job there. As far as in-game so far, I don't know if there is anything that's like, wow, why did he do that? Because, hey, whatever he did, it ended up pulling out a W no matter how ugly it was. And, I'd rather win ugly than lose pretty.
There you go. Yeah, I think Coach Steele, obviously he was kind of put in a kind of a tough position because it seemed like they only got the 2 freshman recruits coming in. So he had to do quick work and get these 3 grad students, fortunately for that rule change a few years ago. And it seems like he brought in exactly what Xavier needed another big man, needed a 3-point shooter, and then needed a kind of a leader in Kyle Castle. You know, they brought him in, and he was picked as a captain by his teammates. So you got to be impressed what he brought in. And then also we did talk about our preview show a little bit that he's been very successful in the upcoming class. So as far as we could tell right now, things seem to be going as we had hoped. And, of course, you know, he's no stranger to Xavier. I think he'd been assistant there for about 10 years under Coach Mack. So he knows, you know, what the expectation is, and he knows, as he started to call it already, kind of going off of Butler, as I sit here and I watch Butler on TV right now, but I've heard him refer to the Xavier way, the way we do things. So he's going to try to, I think, continue the tradition, which goes all the way back to, of course, Pete Gillen, Skip Prosser, Thad Matta, Sean Miller. I mean, you know, the coaches that have been here, it's just, you know, it's a list of very successful coaches. And, of course, Chris Mack was here the longest and won over 200 games. Let's talk about the 2 games. Again, they both came down a little bit closer at the finish. I think they did, pull out to a 13-point lead at the end of the IU-PUI game. But the Evansville, the Aces kept after them. And, in fact, they set a Cintas or a record at the Cintas for 3-point shots made with 17, which is just amazing.
Right.
But the 2 games kind of were similar, where it seemed like the Musketeers started out well, built a decent lead in the first half, only to see it wither away right before halftime to only a point or 2. Is there a concern? Do you have any theories of why that has happened?
You know, defense is a combination of a couple of things when you're playing defensive basketball. And the first thing is totally understanding what you're going to do in each situation. And with, you know, all the new players and the new staff, I think they're still learning. I think they're getting in game situations, and they're being shown things they may not have seen in practice, or it's the first time they've seen them live, and it happens a lot faster. So I think they're going to get better as they see and play more and do more film work on their defensive alignments and positionings, and, you know, which way you're supposed to, you know, direct the guy into the paint if he does start beating you off the dribble, all that stuff will come into play. And I think they'll get better at that. And then it's just that trust factor on defense, knowing that, hey, my guy got by me, and I know there's somebody back there who's going to stop him, and I got to start looking to where I can pick up his guy. And I think that's just, it's all that trust and you know, just understanding, and it's just going to get better as they go. Unfortunately, the schedule gets ratcheted up here real quick on them, and, you know, that learning curve is going to have to be really fast if they want to be successful over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of the story that, you know, we heard the press conference right after the game on Saturday from Coach Steele, and he was not happy, and I've heard a couple press conferences since, and he's taken total responsibility. I kind of like that in him. He didn't, you know, just blame his guys. He said they didn't get done what they were supposed to get done. He actually called them immature or undisciplined, I think was the word he used, but he turned it right on himself. He said, undisciplined players are coached by undisciplined coaches, so it's on me and we got to fix it. I really like that in a coach, where he doesn't really call out his players. I mean, he did, but, again, he took the responsibility and said he was going to fix it. So, yeah, it's going to get – in fact, I just minutes before we went on, we'll talk about it a little bit, I just pulled up that bracket for Maui. I didn't realize everybody that's in there. It's like a who's who of college basketball in the last 10 years. And, man, the Musketeers are going to have their work cut out for them out in Maui. Sorry, I just lost my all right. Quentin Gooden, did you happen to see why he was ejected from the game? I looked and never could find a replay. Of course, I'm sure Xavier in their highlights wasn't going to put out. What I did read was he supposedly pushed the basketball into the defender's face after he'd been called for an offensive foul. Were you able to see the actual – we didn't see it live. We didn't really know what happened, why he was given the technical or why he was ejected from the game. Did you happen to see it, Bill?
I did not. I looked for it today as well, briefly, and couldn't find anything. All I could find was that, essentially what you said, he kind of two-hand shoved the basketball into the head of one of the opposing team players, and, any contact above the head, shoulders and to the head, in college basketball is going to get you in trouble, and he just kind of lost his composure there, which, is not something we've seen from him before. So hopefully that will be addressed and taken care of, and Quentin won't lose his cool again.
Well, in the limited time we did see Quentin for, I think, about 12, 14 minutes in the first half before he was ejected from the game early in the second half. What were your impressions coming off that serious injury of a shoulder dislocation? Fortunately, it's not his shooting shoulder, but what did you see in Quentin, and what were your impressions?
Oh, wow. He looked good. I mean, his three-point shot looked spot on already. You could tell he's really spent a lot of time shooting over the off-season and improving his game in that regard. He looked like he was just shooting with confidence, and he expected every one of them to go in. And I think he made all but one. And then just the athleticism that he brings to the table, that block shot when the Evansville player thought he had a layup, and Quentin just kind of let him go by and just went up and rejected it off the backboard, was pretty incredible defensive play. So I think, with Quentin, Xavier's got their point guard, their distributor of the basketball, but the bonus is I think they have another scorer, and that's just going to make them a lot tougher to defend as they get into these slightly more challenging games ahead and heading into Big East play.
Yeah, we saw some flashes at the end of last year where he started to score a little bit more. Of course, he's very very tough when he takes it to the bucket. I really like it because he finishes almost all the time very strong. And, of course, he has unbelievable vertical jump, so he can get up off the floor, and a lot of times he'll even finish with a dunk when he has a breakaway or gets the ball inside. But I look for him to, I think he's going to be one of those players, if they step away and they give him a three-point shot, it's great that he can make it. I know early in his career he had issues with making the three-pointers, and sometimes they would let him go. But, it's going to be interesting. I think, this team may go as Quentin goes. And, again, I was a little disappointed. I didn't see what happened. Hopefully, maybe it was frustration. He's dealt with probably a lot of frustration not being able to be out on the floor and not being able to practice because of that injury. So hopefully we won't see any more of that out of him. And I really look at him as probably the leader. He was thrust into that role as, if you remember, when Samaje was hurt when he was a freshman. He finished the end of that season and did fairly well. Didn't score a whole lot, but he ran the team, and then he just seemed to get better and better last year as the point guard. And, again, now I think they're going to rely on him for a little bit more offense after having lost, of course, Makura and Blewett and Cantor from last year. Tyreek Jones. Wow. What can you say about Tyreek Jones?
Well, I guess first things, congratulations to him. He was named to the Big East Weekly Honor Roll this week for his performance in the two early games. He had 20 rebounds. It's the most at Xavier since David West had 21 back in, I think it was 2001, in an overtime game against George Washington. And he was just dominant down on the glass. And that's something I think, he can continue to do throughout the rest of the season, is just be a dominant presence in the paint. It looks like the weight he lost has made him so much quicker and more agile in getting to the ball. And then, his strength is still there, so he didn't lose any of that. And as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, he is going to have a really successful season. And I think Coach Steele was saying that he thought he could be a Big East Conference first, second, honorable mention team member here at the end of the season. And he keeps playing like this, he will be.
Yeah, I think, his issues in the past were his fouls. And Saturday against Evansville, I think he only had one. I think he did foul out against IUPUI. And the other problem he's had in the past was with his knees, being able to give him a lot of minutes because he had trouble with his knees. But I think that's probably the main reason why they wanted him to lose the 25 to 30 pounds that he took off. So he's not carrying as much weight, and he seems to have been able to stay on the floor again with as far as physically, and again on Saturday did a very good job of staying out of foul trouble. I really look for him to have a breakout season. What you got to love about Tyreek is he just brings so much energy and emotion to the team. He's kind of like what people would call the heart and soul of the Musketeers, and he's always positive. Yeah, you hardly ever see him in a negative face or a negative action or anything out on the floor. Everything is always upbeat and positive, and he always has that big smile on his face. And I look for great things for him, and it'd be great if he was a first-team Big East player this year. That's what we need. Kind of like hopefully he can take the place of Angel Delgado as the rebounding king. And 20 rebounds. Of course, tomorrow will be an interesting game as the Wisconsin Badgers come in. All right, well, let's talk about the game tomorrow. Wisconsin. What do you know about Wisconsin? What should we expect from Wisconsin? This is going to be a tough challenge for the Musketeers.
Oh yeah, they're definitely returning some key players. I think a lot of people in Wisconsin are happy that Ethan Happ is back. I think they feared that he was going to take off early to the NBA, and a lot of the stuff I'd seen online was they were speculating what their lineup would be without him, and they don't have to do that. He is returning for his senior year to play with the Badgers, and already showing his abilities. He had a triple-double in their first game, which is pretty impressive feat to pull off. The big thing for Wisconsin, I think, is going to be their guard play this year. They went from like 3 starting guards last year to 1, and that one had one good arm and one bad arm, which is Brad Davison. He had an injured shoulder, and he had injured it, I think I read 5 times last year, and continued to play on it. He had an off-season surgery to repair that. And so they got back their other 2 injured players that they had lost last year. Their starting point guard, I want to mess this up probably, but Dimitri Trice. Yep. He had 21 points in the opener, which he hit 5 3-pointers. Definitely a talent for them there. And then they have a talented redshirt freshman who got hurt last year, and they were able to redshirt him. Kobe King, who's a all-around kind of athletic guard, can score from many different ways. Was one of their starting guards, who's now coming in off the bench, Brevin Pritzel. He had 16 points in the opener, and so they're looking to be much improved upon their record last season, and they're hoping to be more successful this year throughout the course of their season, and hopefully not very successful tomorrow night.
Yeah, and of course we know what's the Wisconsin Badgers. You got to be patient. Greg Gard, of course, is the coach now, but, of course, he was a protege of Bo Ryan, and they're going to drain that clock down and hold it for much of the shot clock before and look for the best shot and easy points that they can get. And it's going to call the Musketeers into having to play that defense and stay focused. And, again, the concern is going to be with the way they've played defense and had lapses throughout the first two games. They cannot have those lapses. They're going to have to stay focused for the entire shot clock or, they're going to be in trouble. Yeah, and also Coppin State, that's who they played in that first game. The reason why Hap had 10 points, 11 rebounds, and 12 assists. And watching some of the press conferences, basically what happened was Coppin State would double him every time that they threw the ball into him. And so he just hit the open man for a spot-up three, whoever it was, and they made 12 threes in that game. So that could be a big concern. Now, I did see a press conference with Zach Hankins, I think that was taped yesterday, and he kind of let on that they don't expect – they're not going to try to double Hap. They think that him and Tyreek can play him one-on-one, which will be interesting because, again, they're both very athletic, and Hap is not the greatest athlete in the world, although he is a 6'10", and he is a good shooter. So it'll be interesting to see if the Musketeers can stay out of foul trouble. And, again, that'll be – and I'm sure that Coach Steele has had the attention the last couple days after Saturday's performance, which he was not too happy with, and I don't think any of the players were satisfied with. So I look for the Musketeers to come out realizing that this is a tough team very, very early. In fact, the Musketeers defeated them last year in the Gavitt games up in Madison by 10 points, but it was a back-and-forth game, and if you recall, that was a game where Trayvon hit a couple key dagger threes at the end to kind of salt it away for the Musketeers. And then, of course, maybe a little revenge in the Badgers' mind, if you remember J.P. McCura doing the gator chop to the Badger fans at the end of the game. There's been a little bad blood or a little rivalry between the two. Of course, if you go back 2 years, you remember the shot at the buzzer that Koenig made to knock the Musketeers out of the NCAA tournament in the second round with a team that they thought was going to go a lot further. Many had hoped that might be their first Final Four team. So it's going to be a fun game. And I look forward to it. I think, again, lots of things to look forward to. I'd like to see, I think Quentin will probably start tomorrow from all indications. It'll be interesting to see who the other four are that they put out on the court. It'll be so interesting to see how deep that the rotation goes. Been playing about 9 players deep. A lot of people don't think they'll go that deep tomorrow, especially if it's a close game. Just lots of things to look forward to. Anything else on tomorrow's game before we move into our trivia section of the show?
Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. I know that the Badger faithful are definitely hoping for a big win for their team, and there's probably an effort on their part to make sure that there's some red in the Cintas Center, and hopefully the blue overwhelms them.
All right, yeah, and then again we'll have to talk about it. We're going to do a show Sunday night before the Maui, or because the Musketeers will be playing next Monday afternoon against. I just looked at. I don't know if you saw the new rankings, but they're actually ranked number 8 now. The number 8 team in the country is Auburn. That's their first game. And they will play either Duke, who, of course, is now number 1 in the country, or San Diego State. But I was just looking at the other half of the bracket, which I really hadn't paid much attention to. You got Arizona, we know all about them. Iowa State, Gonzaga, who's number 3 in the country right now, and Illinois, of course, who beat Evansville by about 40 points in their first game. So, but we got to worry about tomorrow night first. We can't be looking forward to that. But that's a wow. But that's what we expect from Xavier now. They're one of the blue bloods now, and they're going to have to play against these teams. All right, you ready for some trivia here?
We'll do our best.
All right, first trivia question. Well, I got a couple ways to go here. Wisconsin, the Badgers. It's an easy, it's 50-50 here. Do you know who leads the series between the Musketeers and the Badgers? Talk about Muskies winning up in Madison last year, and, of course, the Muskies losing in St. Louis in the NCAA tournament. Do you know who leads the overall series through the years?
I think it's tied at 3-3.
You are right. That was a trick question. Can get you on that. Haven't played that much, only 6 games, but they are 3-3. So tomorrow we will break that tie, and somebody will have an advantage in the series. Next question goes to the Gavitt games. Tomorrow is a Gavitt tip-off game. Do you know the significance of Dave Gavitt and why these games were named after him? What position he held or what his significance is with the Big East?
I thought he was like commissioner.
You are right. You are right. He was the very first commissioner. He actually had a huge, it was kind of his idea, the Big East, which of course was one of the first all basketball conferences, started back in 1979. He had actually been a coach at Providence for about 10 years, and he gave up the coaching, but he was a key member of a group that created the Big East, and he then was named the first commissioner of the Big East. And, of course, the games are named after him. And, of course, it is kind of a challenge. It is the Big East against the Big Ten. And there are actually 8 games being played. Xavier tips it off tomorrow night along with Georgetown and Illinois. On Wednesday, what a game. It's a rematch of the national final game in Michigan and Villanova. Also have Seton Hall, Nebraska, and another good game, Marquette at Indiana. And then on Thursday, have Penn State at DePaul, Ohio State at Creighton, and finally on Friday, St. John's at Rutgers. Hopefully we'll get to see the Musketeers play somebody besides Wisconsin in these games next year. Maybe your Buckeyes from Columbus. That'd be a good game, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be nice to see, maybe, Michigan State or anybody. Just somebody different would be nice.
Somebody different. Not quite sure why it worked out that way. Of course, the Musketeers began the Gavitt games 2 years ago. That at Michigan went up and defeated the Wolverines at Chrysler Arena. And, of course, again, last year they went to Madison. So this is the first home game for the Musketeers. And, again, hopefully next year we'll have somebody different. Nothing against the Badgers, but there's a lot of great basketball teams in the Big Ten to play against. So, well, anything else before we sign off?
Just be there cheering on the Muskies tomorrow night, hoping for a big W.
All right. So we'll talk to you next week, and go Muskies.
Go Muskies.
All right, I think our recording is off. Why don't you send me a text when you're leaving your house tomorrow?
Okay, yeah, I will.
And I'll go from there. So, all right.
All right, sounds good, Jim.
All right, good job. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, you too, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.